Coming up on Network Africa. Suicide attack in Somalia kills 3 people, injuring several others in Mogadishu. 2 Spanish journalists and Irish national abducted near a nature reserve in Burkina Faso found dead. Plus, South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa testifies as a witness before a long-running inquiry into allegations of corruption under his predecessor, Jacob Zuma. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Akaite Afia. We began in Somalia, where 3 people have been killed and 7 others, including a baby, wounded after a car bomb exploded outside a prison on the outskirts of Somalia's capital, Mogadishu. The explosion near the entrance of the compound appeared to have caused damage to some of the complex and destroyed other vehicles within the vicinity. No group has yet claimed responsibility for the attack. The attack comes against the backdrop of political turmoil in the Horn of Africa nation, occasioned by President Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed's attempt to extend his term, which expired in February. Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo has backed down from his attempt to extend his tenure for 2 years, a political move that had sparked clan-based fighting in Mogadishu between soldiers supporting him and opposing him. In a broadcast addressed to the nation, he called for a new presidential election and commended the efforts of his prime minister, who hours earlier had denounced Mr. Farmajo's bid to cling to office after his term expired in February. Mr. Farmajo said he would appear in Parliament on Saturday to restore the 17th of September 2020 deal on a proposed electoral framework, which would reserve the 2-year extension of his term passed by legislators on the 12th of April. The 2020 agreement refers to a process under which clan elders select delegates to electoral colleges, which in turn choose federal lawmakers who then pick the president. Alesta Wilcox, an African affairs analyst, joins us now for more discussions. Alexa, thanks for joining us on the program. So what do you make of President Farmajo backing down on his decision to extend his presidential tenure?
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's always my pleasure. The situation in Mogadishu is very fluid, and there were a lot of opposition to that plan initially. So opposition was not only from within, it was also from other international agencies, the EU, even the US. The US Secretary of State had to even issue a statement. African Union has called a condemnation to that. So it was not it was not unexpected that with the barrage of opposition that greeted that policy, it's not unexpected that any sensible leader would beat a retreat. So I am confident that this is one victory for the international community and to have had an African leadership who is always stuck in treaty, so sit tight in office and not respect agreement. So it's gratifying that he took such a bold step, even at this point, in order to save his country from further turmoil.
Well, now Farmajo wants to restore the September 17, 2020 deal that has a process under which clan elders select delegates to electoral colleges, which in turn choose federal lawmakers who then pick the president. So looking at this process, some say this could take a while. What do you have to say about it?
Well, the agreement was very clear that by 2020, there will have been an indirect election from which is just what you have ruled out. That was very clear in the agreement. Remember, Somalia has been through a lot of political tension and political turmoil. And at every point in time, there has been negotiations as to how to get out of it and form a government of national unity. And so this was part of the agreement. It was supposed to be an indirect election where clan leaders are supposed to pick delegates from which parliament will be elected and from which the president will be elected. Those were clear, and it was supposed to have taken place in 2020 and in 2021. The unfortunate thing be the fact that the president chooses to renege on that. And with the support of a few members in the parliament, in the lower parliament, decided to extend it by 2 years. And that greeted with serious opposition. Even the upper legislative parliament the speaker rejected that move. So it's not going to take time, but already the agreements are on ground. And it's just for the people of Somalia and the whatever structure that's in place to work towards that. It's not supposed to be a full-blown election. It's a general election. There are semi-autonomous states within Somalia that they've all had this agreement worked out. As to why the president choose to renege on this agreement remains known to him and his cronies alone. So it's not going to be a long process. It's a process that has already been worked out, and all they need to do is to activate the machinery that has been set in place for them to move forward.
There is expected to be a meeting on Saturday. What should be the crux of this summit that will help solve the impasse in Somalia?
Well, the meeting on Saturday should only put vent to the action. Well, let me call it noble action that the president has taken. It's just for them to tidy up the knots. And I'm sure they're not going to be alone. Some international agencies will be involved. I believe that the AU will be invited, the EU, the UN, and some other people that have interest. It's just for them to seal up any broken ends. I don't know the agenda for the meeting, but I'm expecting that it is for them to seal up any loose end. And at this point, I think it's time for the president to leave. His term has expired as February. So it's time for him, part of the decision might be for him to resign, and for the prime minister either to take control of government till the election can be held. Allowing the president to stay in power beyond this, up to this point, with all this confusion, will not all go well for the people of Somalia. So there should be more pressure on the president to resign his office. He has outlived his office, and then let the prime minister take charge, either the prime minister or the speaker of the other parliament take charge of government, and with a clear mandate to implement the accord that was supposed to see them full election this year and next year respectively. That should be the crux of the meeting. I'm expecting that should be the crux of the meeting, because another thing to the contrary might still continue to create turmoil in Somalia.
Well, we do hope that those talks on Saturday will prove productive. Thanks so much, Alesta, for joining us today on the program.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
2 Spanish journalists and an Irish national abducted near a nature reserve in eastern Burkina Faso have been killed. The Europeans were part of an anti-poaching patrol that was ambushed by gunmen near Pama Reserve on Monday. Burkina Faso government officials confirmed their deaths on Tuesday. A local soldier was also abducted, but his status is unknown. It remains unclear who carried out the attack. The West African country is facing a deepening security crisis, like many of its neighbors, as Islamist armed groups carry out raids and kidnappings across much of the region. South Africa's president has appeared before the Commission of Inquiry looking into state capture, also known as the Zondo Commission. This is the first of 2 appearances where he is speaking as the president of the ruling African National Congress. The president was given room for an opening statement by the chairman of the commission, Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, who said that this appearance was from an agreement reached in 2018 that the ruling party would help the commission complete its work as the ruling party all through the period being looked into.
In the first of 4 appearances, President Cyril Ramaphosa is appearing this time as the president of the ruling African National Congress and the party's deputy president for part of the time being investigated by the inquiry. He said he was not there to make excuses for the ruling party nor to defend the indefensible, but to help the commission complete its job. At the center of questioning today was a request for more clarity on the rationale behind the party-catered deployment to public office positions, which many believe is often at the expense of much-needed competence.
What is the importance, Mr. President, of this deployment committee having the power to recommend as opposed to simply identifying potential candidates and encouraging them to apply like everybody and be considered, and if they are considered the most deserving, they get appointed?
I take that, and it's not impossible for the deployment committee to function in that way, because all that it really seeks to do and should seek to do is to get whoever is fit for purpose, particularly now in this new, if you like, reformed era of making sure that we do have people who are really good and fit for purpose, who will be able to execute the task at hand without feeling that they need to pursue and advance certain side interests.
Outside the commission, many of the opposition parties and even some of the ANC's alliance partners had questions they also need answered by the president.
We are here as the Congress of the People to say to President Ramaphosa, he must tell the South Africans the truth. All we want is the truth. What South Africans are interested in is to know, what did he do? He must not tell us about the 9 wasted years under Zuma. He was the deputy president. If he saw something wrong, what did he do?
Social media had the president's appearance trending for most of the morning in the country, and the people had questions they would like answered too. President Ramaphosa would appear once more on Thursday as the ANC president, and for 2 days at the end of May, he will be responding in person again as the president of the country and the deputy president of the country for part of the time, being investigated by the commission. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
More than 30 prisoners have escaped after a police van that was transporting them to a law court was attacked by gunmen in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. Some prisoners remained in the van that was forced open by heavily armed attackers. KwaZulu-Natal Police spokesperson Brigadier Jay Naker said police are looking for those who escaped, as there is a warning to residents to be aware because of the escapes might be looking for civilian clothes. We will have more on this after the break, but still to come on the program. Mauritius issues disaster alert over heavy rains that have caused flooding in several locations in the country. Please stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. More than 30 prisoners have escaped after a police van that was transporting them to a law court was attacked by gunmen in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, joins us now for more on this. Betty, can you tell us more about this attack and what we know at this time?
Well, the attack, we often see this from time to time when awaiting trial prisoners or even those convicted, probably appealing, are being taken from prison custody to court. Some of their colleagues outside usually try to free one or two. In this case, you had 45. I'm sure their cases are not the same, but 45 of them were being transported from Pietermaritzburg, which is the administrative capital of KwaZulu-Natal province, from the new prison to the magistrate's court. And 5 men attacked the truck, taking them to the court. 31 escaped while the rest remain. But from the spokesperson of the SAPS, that's the South African Police Service, Jay Naker, more of them are back in custody. About 25 or 26 of them are back in custody. Some handed themselves in, and then the rest are still on the run, and some were caught by the police. Although the members of the public have been warned to be vigilant, for their own safety, as well as the fact that some of them will be looking for clothes to change their orange overalls into, and then to support the police in the hunt, the manhunt that is going on at the moment. But almost half of the 45 are back in custody.
Well, with investigations ongoing and the police trying to find those who escaped, how are the residents reacting to the situation?
So it's not exactly making headlines because we see this happening from time to time. We also have a number of top crime cases, gender-based violence issues. Some teacher who has been they've been looking for her. She's been missing for some time. They found her body in a shallow grave. So there are a number of stories. That's apart from the president who is appearing at the Assembly Commission. But people are worried when things like this happen, and they worry for their own safety at the same time. Hopefully the police will be able to get them back, have them in custody in no time. But they also require the support or information from members of the public to achieve that.
Definitely. Well, Betty, thanks so much for joining us on the program today.
Thank you very much.
The UN Children's Agency, UNICEF, will redistribute to other countries more than 1 million doses of vaccines meant for the Democratic Republic of Congo so that they don't expire. The vaccines distributed under the Global COVAX initiative expire on the 24th of June, according to UNICEF. About 1.3 million doses out of the 1.7 million doses will now go to other countries, including Senegal, Comoros, Ghana, and Angola. DR Congo has delayed its rollout of the AstraZeneca vaccines, which it received in March over the concerns that they could be linked to rare blood clots. It began its vaccination campaign on the 19th of April, but only 1,265 people have received the jab. Botswana's president, Mokwetsi Masisi, has gone into self-isolation after coronavirus cases were detected among his staff members. The president had been sent to take part in regional talks in Mozambique, meant to discuss the insecurity in Cabo Delgado province. His vice president will instead lead the delegation from Botswana for a meeting on Wednesday and submit on Thursday in Mozambique. The attacks in Cabo Delgado are of great concern to the southern African region as refugees flee to neighboring countries. The United Nations and 2 international aid charities have called on urgent assistance to be sent to the Sahel region of West and Central Africa. They say 29 million people there need help, including 1.6 million children suffering from severe malnutrition. Attacks by Islamist militia have created what the UN called unparalleled insecurity and displaced 5.5 million people. Food prices have soared and hunger has risen to its highest level in roughly a decade. 6 countries are affected: Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, Chad, and parts of Nigeria and Cameroon. Mauritius issues disaster alert over heavy rains that have caused flooding in several locations in the country. The Indian Ocean island has recorded more than 100 millimeters of rain accompanied by thunderstorms in various regions within 24 hours. Heavy rains have caused severe flooding in the south, a region that had already been affected by heavy rains in the past 2 weekends. Flooded houses and soggy grounds in the region have forced some residents in the country's south to leave their homes to seek safety in shelters or with relatives. Evacuation operations for some residents were carried out overnight and have continued. According to the Meteorological Service, the heavy rain will persist overnight. UN humanitarian chief Mark Lowcock is calling on governments to continue to leverage political dialogue, sanctions, and arms transfer decisions to ensure respect for the law and the protection of civilians. Addressing the UN Security Council, Lowcock said that over the last 30 years, there has been some progress in the compliance with international humanitarian law to protect civilians. However, at the same time, big military powers are reorienting military planning, training, and spending to deter and defeat enemy states.
The impact of armed conflict on food security can be direct, for example, through the disruption of food stocks and agricultural assets. Attacks on food drive people to move, and they disrupt food systems and markets, leaving few people able to afford food or access to water and fuel to prepare food. Last year in Nigeria, an attack on a rice farm in the outskirts of Maiduguri killed more than 110 farmers. Pillaging of food and livestock was widely reported in South Sudan between 2013 and 2020. In Yemen, airstrikes and shelling have hit farms, markets, food storage sites, and fishing boats.
Secretary-General should use his good offices to engage with all parties to armed conflict, including non-state armed groups, to call for restraint and promote compliance with the laws of war, reminding that the rule of precaution in attacks requires fighters to spare civilian infrastructure and the natural environment. UN peace operations and country teams could support the adoption of national strategies for the protection of civilians, which ought to include the protection of vital civilian objects, and the facilitation of humanitarian activities. When possible, prevention should include efforts to foster cooperation around natural resources, especially water diplomacy, to turn these natural resources from sources of tension into instruments of peace.
In armed conflict.
And finally on the program, homeless children and adults find new lease on life at an Egyptian center that's been established to provide shelter for those without a home or a family cares for men, women, and children of all ages. Take a look.
Children and elderly citizens enjoy a day outdoors, watching dance performances and playing games. This event was organized at a homeless shelter northeast of Egypt's capital, Cairo, which houses children and adults who once had to live on the streets and beg for food, abandoned by their families. The center is part of a Ministry of Social Solidarity program that aims to provide care for children and the elderly in 13 areas where the number of homeless people is at the highest.
The program started after the Egyptian government made a decision to develop all care homes and the tools that they use to approach and attract children and the elderly living on the streets and provide them with a stable living.
Located in Sharqiya, the center has since its establishment taken in men, women and children, provided them with sleeping quarters, help, psychological rehabilitation services and from time to time, entertainment.
I consider them all as my siblings and mother. I consider the children as my own, and the mothers here too. I consider them as my mothers.
I used to live in the street after my mother and father abandoned me. When I came here to the center, I found a new family.
Since 2016, the government has implemented painful economic reforms that added to financial pressures on many of Egypt's 100 million citizens. Egyptian officials say they could not provide accurate figures for homeless rates nationally. A UNICEF report from 2016 said both the rate and the total number of children living in poverty had been on the rise over the previous 15 years, with a marked acceleration since 2010 and 2011.
Well, that is all we have for the program today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Akaite Afia. Have a great evening and stay safe.